to this track, Phoenix Raceway. The battle amongst its very hot and tight confines. It's seen plenty of racetrack changes throughout the years, including the addition to the dogleg built in the late 2000s. Today, the top drivers in the PRL Cup Series look to try and see who can come out on top in the desert. It's a hot one today in the middle of the day for race number 7 of the PRL Cup Series season, sponsored by Diecast Kings here on the Global SimRacing Channel. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Justin Prince. Alongside me tonight is JTG Doherty Racing number 37 Chevrolet Camaro driver in the NASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series, Christian Challoner. Behind the scenes, star director Sean Ambrose, and he's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. These drivers have been preparing for more than 2-3 hours for tonight's action. Let's take a look at your GSRC lap guide for the best way to drive around this very hot track.
Pocono Raceway in Long Pond, Pennsylvania is probably one of the most unique oval tracks in the country and has a long and storied history of racing. Opening in 1971, they wanted this place to be different, so why not make it have 3 turns? That's right, a triangle. But isosceles triangles are boring, so let's model each turn differently with different radiuses and banking. So around here, you have this incredibly long front straight, known as the Long Pond Straight.
Welcome to the Valley of the Sun and Phoenix Raceway. Located about 15 minutes west of downtown Phoenix at the base of the Estrella Mountains, Phoenix Raceway opened in 1964. Phoenix is known for its unique tri-oval layout, and in 2011 underwent a facelift for the first time in its history, adding banking to both corners while opening up that dogleg into a high bank sweeping corner with lots of room down on the apron. This resulted in a drastic change in racing here in the desert. The original layout called for using the sweeping turns 3 and 4 to set up a pass in the out-braking zone entering turn 1. But the new layout, especially with the NASCAR style cars and an open dogleg, encourages quite the opposite, as several different entry lines now exist for turns 3 and 4, often allowing for side-by-side racing and better passing opportunities on the back half of the track. Now, the renovated layout still possesses many risks to over-eager drivers here at Phoenix. The apron in turns 3 and 4 can be especially slick on an open-wheel car, and don't forget the wall on corner exit. Turn 4 has claimed many aggressive drivers throughout the years. That wall just kind of feels like it pops out and grabs you at times. And while the changes here have helped make racing more competitive, the age-old rule, of course, still applies. Track position is king. Get out in front, you're sure to have an easier time navigating this tricky track. So what do you say? Why don't we hike up Rattlesnake Hill, grab your virtual chair, and settle in for what's sure to be a great show.
Taking a look at Barney the Flagman. That was your GSRC lap guide for Pocono Raceway. That flagman's going to see potentially a lot of action today, to say the very least, Christian. What else can you add about this racetrack, especially since it's very difficult, and keep in mind, this is the pre-updated racetrack before the most recent renovations to the circuit.
Absolutely. This is obviously the variation where the back stretch and the front stretch are flipped comparative to how it is in real life these days. So that's our main difference. We don't have the start-finish line in the dogleg, so to speak. It's actually on what is now the back stretch. And this is a very, very tricky 1-mile oval. It's always extremely hot here. It's out in the desert. And every single turn on this racetrack is different. Through turn 1, you have 8 to 9 degrees of banking, and it's always difficult to get the car to rotate through there. Then you've got the backstretch dogleg, where it always gets extremely wild on the run down to turn 3. And then 3 and 4, which is a very flat, very long corner, and it's always difficult to get the car to come off the turn. And I think we're going to see some problems on the exit of there tonight.
Especially with the tight pit wall as well, I think as well. It's going to be an entertaining one to see who can balance out some of the heat. We'll touch upon that in just a few moments. First things first, the series is brought to you by many sponsors, including Diecast Kings. Shop Diecast Kings, your home for the best selection of NHRA NASCAR diecast cars at diecastkings.com. Once again, diecastkings.com. You can also find them on Facebook at facebook.com/diecastking. This series is also sponsored by Road Trip Transport. Whether a tractor or truck or anything in between, we can move it. Specializing in all kinds of flatbed freight. Call Road Trip Transport at 251-525-7429. And lastly, this series is also presented by ButtKicker. ButtKicker products include incredible immersion and bring realism to every game. Feel every nuance and truly put yourself in the driver's seat. To feel what you've been missing, go to thebuttkicker.com. Let's take a look at what you may have been missing in the championship standings after 6 races, and it's been domination station. Richard Regan Jr. has won 5 of the 6 races this season. The 2-time defending champ leads 25 points over his AthleteBooker.com eSports teammate, James O'Brien. Third spot is Bradley Hawley in the Waterback Joey Rolls Racing Machine. Joshua Daniels, Danny Cervantes round out your top 5 in the point standings after 6 races without drops. And you can tell with a bit of that consistency for 3 of the top 4 drivers, there's a reason AthleteBooker.com eSports leads the team standings entering tonight. 90 points is the advantage, 6 combined victories, that's every single race so far, 13 top 5s, 17 top 10s, and oh by the way, 4 poles already on the campaign. Waterback Joey Rolls Racing, Car Ramrod, SGE Esports, and Adams Family Racing round out the top 5. Good job by the brothers to move into the top 5. But Christian, let's take a look at those race details for what's expected to be a hot one.
So round 7 of 10 tonight. It definitely moving into the second half of the season at this point. 105 laps tonight. I think we should get that in within the 1-hour time limit that we have on the series. Fixed setup as always. And we have a 24-point incident limit. And with it being short track racing and generally a pretty action-packed track, I think we might see a couple of drivers getting close to that tonight.
Absolutely. Before we get towards the track discussion a little bit more for tonight, including those hot temperatures, I ask you one question. Are you interested in advertising with GSRC? The channel's 1 million monthly global impressions are a great way to get your branding seen by a diverse audience. Follow this link in the description to the YouTube version of this broadcast to learn more about the Global SimRacing Channel. We talked about how hot this racetrack is expected to be tonight. It has dropped a little bit as this practice has progressed, especially with some of the partly cloudy skies, but the air temp is red hot, 79 degrees. It's still 125 degrees Fahrenheit, and one of the drivers tonight, Adam Young, came into our Discord earlier tonight and mentioned, even though it's hot, the cars are going to be sliding. It's going to be sliding when it's sunny. It's going to be sliding when it's cloudy, Christian.
Yeah, this is one of those tracks where I think the rescan was done pretty early in its life in terms of the pavement. And it's just always felt like there's absolutely no grip out there no matter what the track temperature is. Even in a very cold track, it always feels like the car's never hooked up, especially in the 3 and 4 end of the racetrack. You're always fighting for grip on the exit, and then you'll get down to 1 and 2, and it always feels like it's difficult to get the car off the corner there, just because the gearing is never really suited this racetrack well at all, and you always struggle to get a good pull off of 2. And then out of 3 and 4, it's always kind of traction limited.
And these drivers have struggled, especially in the dogleg even, with how the fixed setup is for tonight. The clouds starting to settle in a little bit. But at the top of the board, James O'Brien, Bradley Hawley, Daniel Knight with a strong practice so far in hot lap times. Pat Harvey, Richard Regan Jr. round out the top 5 in the practice. We're talking about this, though, the 46 machine of Richard Regan Jr. He's been near untouchable this season, Christian. The only time he didn't win a race was because he got a pit road speeding penalty. Other than that, he's been able to win the past 4 straight races in the AthleteBooker.com eSports Ford Mustang as he comes out of the pits for more practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously winning 5 of the 6 races this season, as you said, only because of that pit road speeding penalty that he didn't really have a shot at that 6th one. I think definitely tonight we should be looking out for him to make it maybe 5 in a row. He's obviously capable of doing so. That said, in terms of the practice times tonight, I don't know whether he's just saving a little bit before we transfer into qualifying, but it definitely looks like there's a couple of drivers out there that might be able to challenge him. Obviously, James O'Brien set a very fast time. And as we were saying, Daniel Knight is also up there in the top 3 right now.
Remember, Regan Jr. actually said he expected O'Brien to actually have a shot to beat him if he didn't have his struggles with some of the penalties in the last race at New Hampshire. See him right now up by about 2/100ths on the board. Another driver you're watching, though, is third on the practice charts and is currently in the pit lane, Daniel Knight, one of the riding shotgun machines.
Yeah, he's had a very strong practice so far, and obviously definitely able to set down a good lap time. And this is one of those tracks where I feel like I say it every week, especially with the package considerations that we have on the mile and a halves, but this is one of those tracks where it is always extremely difficult to pass. Even on the low downforce, high power car, it's still extremely tricky to get by. So track position really is everything. Obviously, we saw that to an extent in New Hampshire as well. It looked like actually Richard Regan Jr. was under a little bit of threat for the second half of the race from Bradley Holly, but Holly not able to make his way by.
Track position was very key and might be key tonight, as practice is now wrapped up. These drivers now have 5 minutes to set 2 solo qualifying laps to try and get track position. 31 cars in the field tonight, Christian. And a quick thing to note before the drivers hit the track, there was a non-broadcasted equivalent of the series, which was essentially to help development of drivers, as well as test how some of the new competitors would be. That series has now been disbanded, and the drivers who made at least 5 of the 6 races in that series are now getting their first starts tonight. Jeff Smith, James Duke, Ron Holyfield, James Durr, Derek Schilling, Alec Lumpkin, and Christopher Williams will all get a shot to be on the racetrack. 2 of them previously raced last season. Many of those names, though, Christian, brand new to the series.
Yeah, and I think this is a really difficult race to come into. Obviously, we've said already how slick this racetrack always is, and to be in a 31 car field around here, there tends to always be at least a couple of big wrecks in a Phoenix race, and I think obviously for those guys, really survival should be kind of their goal.
Taking a look at Brandon T. Adams, he's looking to survive this qualifying run. He had a 4-wheel drift off the final corner, Christian. Talk us through the second lap as he tries to get himself recomposed.
Yeah, so it's really difficult when you get down to 1 and 2. The main goal is to get the car turned in early and get it down on that yellow line, because if you don't, if you're slightly wide, it's really difficult to get the power back in without the rear end snapping around on the exit. Then you kind of want to cut as much of the dogleg as absolutely possible, and then it's really how deep do you dare to drive into 3 and 4. And again, you really want to stay to close to that yellow line. Sometimes you see some drivers really diamonding the corners, others like to run right up against it. And it's all about how much drive you can get off on exit, and it's really difficult, because if you just overstep it a little bit, you'll lose maybe a 1/4 of a tenth with wheel spin on exit. So you have to be committed to get the good drive to the line, but you also have to be careful to make sure you don't get wheel spin.
As you can see on the left side of your screen, after a contest at the top of the board, he set the fastest time out of anybody throughout any of the sessions so far, 27.2. Adam Zemke put in tons of lap times prior to tonight. I talked about the car being evil in the dogleg. Robert Bisson Jr., meanwhile, he's looking for a little bit of luck, and he's looking good in qualifying. So the pace seems to be fairly good, and for some reason, some of the short tracks, such as this one, Christian, can bring out the talent out of some competitors who may struggle with the big tracks, especially in part at 750 horsepower low downforce.
Yeah, and it's a totally different driving style. Obviously, on the mile and a halves, it kind of comes into how aggressive you can be in a pack, and how well you can time your moves, and how assertive you can be with passes to make sure you're always going forwards and not going backwards. So we see Richard Regan Jr. actually coming to the line right now, and doesn't set a time well good enough to take himself to the pole, which is actually really surprising. I really thought he'd at least be in the 3s, so to be in the 5s, that's sending him back a little bit already.
See Bradley Holly now starting to take time for his qualifying run. Richard Regan Jr., though, looking to pick up time on his 27.538 the first time around. Second time, 27.380, only good enough to gain 2 spots. One of the first times we won't see him towards the front row on the season. There that to Danny Cervantes, who hit the wall the previous run around. He gets the chance to reset for his first. While Bradley Holly, he's already up inside the top 3.
surprised that we've got 2 drivers in the 2s right now. I did think that we might see it with the track being a little bit cooler compared to practice, but that's a great lap by Abner Acosta right now to do a 2:59. That's well clear of anything we saw in practice.
Yeah, looking really, really solid here as Danny Cervantes puts in the time. Remember, he hit the wall coming up to the run-up to the first time in 17th, though. While Bradley Hawley, his best time at 27.301, 6/1,000 slower the second time around. As the rest of these drivers cycle around, a couple things to note. Brett Adams, Steve Durbin, not allowed to set qualifying times due to caution points accumulated in the past 3 races, so they'll start at the back. Adam Young, Chad Brown have also not put in a qualifying time. Everybody else, including Danny Cervantes and company, have put in a time. Your quick thoughts on how this qualifying session worked out, especially with 2 drivers in the 2s and plenty of the drivers around the 4s through 6s.
Well, we've definitely got a couple of drivers up near the front that have had some great qualifying sessions. Paul Johnson with a 27.315 for 4th, and Daniel Knight in 5th right now with 27.372. We saw him looking good in practice, and obviously that's transferred through to qualifying. I think the biggest surprise is Richard Regan Jr. though, being back in that 7th spot. Obviously, he's still in the top 10, but he's made life a little bit more difficult for himself than he usually does.
We'll see how he does tonight as we take a look at how qualifying shaped out with your starting grid for tonight. Abner Acosta sets the pole tonight with a 27.259. James O'Brien starts in P2. Those are the only 2 drivers in the 27.2s. Bradley Hawley and Paul Johnson start in row 2, the highest starting position for Paul Johnson this season after selling his bad luck in the 14. Danny Nart starts in P5, Joshua Daniels in row 3 in P6. Row 4, Regan Jr., one of the deepest starting positions of the season. Cervantes in P8, Esau Jr. and Harvey round out your top 10, Christian.
And just missing out on the 27.4s and just missing out on the top 10, we got Adam Zemke. He's lining up in 11th with Colton Lane alongside him in 12th. Charles Sumner, a driver we see regularly hanging out in the top 10. He's in 13th alongside Mike Knight in 14th. Then we've got Scotty Johnson with a 27.624 in 15th. Ron Hollifield, driver we've not seen so far this season, is 16th. Jose Medina is 17th with Mark Kalin at 18th. And then we have James Duke in 19th with Jeffrey Smith in 20th.
Field, the highest of the drivers for the non-broadcasted side. Christopher Williams, another one of those drivers, starts in 21st alongside his fellow compatriot in Alec Lumpkin. Matthew Wilford starts in 23rd. Lane Adams, 24th. Brenton Adams, 25th. James Dewey and Derek Schilling were the last drivers to set times. The rest of the field set via provisionals. Brent Adams, Adam Young, Stephen Durbin, and Chad Brown are your 31 entrants into today's race here at Phoenix. 105 miles on tap, 105 laps, 170 kilometers here at this racetrack, which opened in 1964 and has seen various different configurations, including originally opening as a road course before the oval was constructed in the 1990s to its eventual layout we see here today, with several different configurations to the infield as well as to the dogleg edition throughout the series' history in the Cup Series. Tonight expected to be a wild one. Your keys to victory tonight?
Really stay out front. That's the key here at Phoenix. Obviously, it's the key at every racetrack, but with it being so difficult to pass, you have to make sure that you don't lose that track position. It will be very, very difficult to move your way back forwards. And especially on restarts, you have to be so careful with the dogleg. We do see drivers fanning out, and we do see some issues with spotter calls when you go through there. Sometimes drivers have no idea that they're 3 or 4 wide until they start trying to funnel back together for turn 3.
2 drivers did miss the start. James Duke, Blaine Adams. That timing and scoring is available for this race at GSRC.tv. Abner Acosta looks to try and set the tempo early in this race. It's his first pole of 2020 Season 3. We're all set to go. Barney the flagman with the green flag in hand. We're underway as James O'Brien with a massive jump. Start for Acosta, otherwise he's able to retake the lead, but O'Brien was a full car length ahead at the start and finish line, and the caution is out of the back of the field already. Dewar involved. He is your first caution of the night in his first race back in the main series.
We did expect there to be a yellow, not necessarily right on the start, but obviously it happened quite deep in the field.
You got a little bit of help, it looks like, though, from underneath, and so many drivers here, Christian, risk going 3 wide, it seems, in 3 and 4, especially with the flatness to it. You see, that's Wolford who risked it.
Yeah, exactly, and that was actually a good example of what I was talking about with how the cars funnel back together as they get to turn 3, and drivers aren't really sure if they're 3 or 4 wide or not. It definitely looked like that was the case there. 32 was kind of just trying to run a solid line. He was actually a little bit slow through the dog leg. The 014 tried to get underneath him, and I just don't think the 32 was expecting it.
So we're quickly under the caution flag already in this race, and found that start very intriguing, Christian, because O'Brien, we've seen him do something we see from some drivers in late race conditions in some official races where they try and get a half car length ahead. He got a full car length ahead in front of Acosta and company.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that actually wasn't a black flag penalty for doing that. Obviously, Acosta was holding the field for a very, very long time, and I don't think he'll be doing that again on subsequent restarts because it didn't really work out for him, especially as O'Brien was definitely ahead by the time they got to turn 1. I am surprised that O'Brien didn't pick up a penalty for that, though I think that the admins probably would have cleared that because it was really not his fault.
A little bit, yeah. Wilford showing Dewar among the drivers who got damage. On the bright side, if you're a fan of James Duke, he started from the pit lane after missing the start. He doesn't lose a lap as a result. The bad news, Lane Adams has elected to pack up his equipment and go home, it appears. For the time being, he may be coming back, though, in the next few moments. He's already a couple laps down.
Yeah, obviously that's not how you want to start the race. Yellow does help you out with that. Obviously the slower pace means you lose less laps with the disconnect, but still, he'll definitely be at least 2 to 3 laps down by the time he gets back in.
And the unelected also go back to the back of the field at this point. One of the main things you think about, though, when it comes to Phoenix is you might see a lot of strategy here. How do you see the strategy playing out in a race such as this tonight?
I think the tire wear at this racetrack can be quite unusual, and well, specifically the tire drop-off can be quite unusual. And it's one of those where it tends to have some significant drop-off near the beginning of a run, and then really flattens out quite early. So I think we'll see drivers electing to always take the track position unless a vast majority of the field decides to come down.
Especially if you get caution, brake, caution, brake, caution. And one of the main things noticed when there was the high downforce package here in 2019 especially was dirty air was a massive, massive trouble spot once the tires seemed to come into play, Christian. How do you see it playing out with the low downforce, though, tonight?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. With the old high downforce package at this racetrack, the dirty air was miserable to say the least when you were trying to follow a car and try and pass. And it's still a factor, but it's vastly reduced since last year, and even more so with the low downforce car. One thing that I have noticed with the low downforce high power car though is there's not as much suck up when you're in somebody's draft as you might think, and it makes it more difficult to execute passes at tracks such as road courses or short tracks, even ones such as this where the straightaway is quite long.
See how things turn out here when we get back to the green flag. Already approaching the end of lap 5. 100 laps to go this time by. Holly is already in P3. The top 8 did not swap positions. Phoenix going to Phoenix as we get ready for what appears to be the 1 to go signal. Yes, double them up once again. Only position swap inside the top 10. Pat Harvey moved to the bottom side to take away P9. We saw Junior fall back to P10 after the jump. Everyone else starts where they began this race after 1 lap of green.
Hopefully we'll get a cleaner restart this time, though. It really looked like it was a little bit of a misunderstanding on that first yellow. And now drivers have got a little bit of experience, but a significant amount of experience. Obviously going too wide through turn 1. I think we should see a bit more understanding by the time we get to turn 3 on this restart.
Meanwhile, Blaine Adams currently dealing with the technical issues, still struggling to get his car back on the racetrack. 30 cars are still running on the lead lap. Door does have damage. There is a bit of damage, though, should note, on the 77 of Joshua Daniels after contact to the wall. Green flag is back up. We're back underway. And a better start from the bottom side. Acosta much earlier, and Hawley takes advantage to take away P2 quick.
Yeah, complete reversal this time. Acosta waited so long on the initial start of the race. This time he was going right as they got to the exit of turn 4, and he's got a huge jump.
Already up by a couple car lengths as here comes the deep zone in 3 and 4. Knight trying to take away a spot from O'Brien. Daniels trying to take away a spot from Paul Johnson. Regan Jr. looking to take another spot as Jeffrey Smith is in trouble. The 96 around to the very back of the field, and we're under caution a second time.
And again, it looked like it all happened on the entry of 3.
Now the 96, once again, a Jeffrey Smith, and it was a more delayed kind of spin. He gave a lot more space, have to say, though, compared to what Dewar had on the first caution.
Yeah, definitely was a similar kind of incident with 2 cars overlapping on the entry to 3, and it was interesting because it looked like it was the 64 of Chad Brown going around with the later contact that actually brought out the yellow.
Yeah, you see that right there. Let's on board and see what happened here.
So you can see the incident happening just up ahead, and Chad Brown here trying to get around. It just gets clipped, and it sends him for a spin on the exit of turn 4.
So the 96 was part of the trigger. The 64 was the second part of the chain. So the 96 shuffled all the way from the mid-pack to 28. Chad Brown is all the way back in 30th with red hot tires. Approaching the end of lap 9 already, and what would you tell the drivers at this point with what we've seen so far, especially with 2 cautions at the mid to back pack of the field and only about 2 and maybe 0.1 green flag laps so far?
I think in both cases it's come about through to a car on the top or the middle side of the racetrack not really being appreciative of a car driving it in so deep on the bottom line, and I don't really think that it's anything. It's anybody's fault, so to speak. It's just a matter of this racetrack where it can be quite strange like that. If you don't get a good run off of turn 2, then you are vulnerable into 3. And sometimes it can look like the pass is on for the car behind when the driver ahead is really not expecting it. And I think that's what we've seen on both cautions here. And it's just gotta come about through the car making the pass. Has probably got to be a little bit more cautious so early on in the race, and the car being passed has probably got to have an understanding that if they leave the bottom lane open, even if it's just half a car width, then their presentation is making it a little bit unclear for the driver behind, and sometimes it can obviously end up with the meeting in the middle in 3 and 4.
Absolutely. By the way, Blaine Adams is finally on the racetrack. He's 8 laps down and just completed his 2nd lap of this race. 8 more cautions and he gets back into contention in this thing in the 33.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, the only car off the lead lap right now, and hopefully it doesn't continue at the rate of cautions that it has. But if it does, then we could definitely see him getting back on the lead lap.
We talked a little bit about some of the team's backgrounds. A member of the Adams family actually reached out after the last race to mention that for several of these drivers, a part of this family, it's among some of their first times racing in the past few months in iRacing. And they all joined together in this series as a family of brothers. In today's action, they essentially began all the way back in the beginning of May, Christian, and we've seen a couple times the Adams have some decent runs.
Yeah, definitely. They've had a pretty successful year so far, and I think they're kind of building on that, and it's definitely looks like it's working for them. However, they're arranged, and obviously that's a big part of racing as well. That if you're working in a group where you're enjoying yourself and you're having a lot of fun, then sometimes it's better to stick with that and to run with that and to develop that rather than say try and shoot for a competitive team that's really all about results.
So essentially you would work your way up is what you're saying, if I understand that correctly, rather than just throwing yourself into say, hey, I'm going to join a Coke team. I just joined iRacing 3 minutes ago.
Yes, exactly. I think in some cases that you can actually develop a team from the ground up, and if you do get all the way to the highest level, then it will actually work better because you're working with your friends and they're drivers, team members that you've known for a very long time, and obviously it really gels, and there's no communication issues, so to speak, and everybody's on the level, and it's actually my preferred way of doing it. There's been quite a few times where I would rather work with people I've known for a long time than necessarily who might say be the fastest at that point in time.
Understand that point of view, absolutely, especially some of the personal experience, but Acosta is your race leader. Holly is in second. Looking on board as well with O'Brien in P3, Knights in fourth, Daniels, Johnson, Regan Jr., Cementis, Holly, and Bisson Jr. round out the top 10 at the moment. Let's ride on board with O'Brien as he looks to go through the gears. He's inside row 2 for the green flag. Acosta off and away.
O'Brien with again, not a great restart there, stacking up the bottom lane behind him. We've got Joshua Daniels and Richard Regan Jr. kind of pushing him down into turn 1.
Decent start. Remember, O'Brien got a freight train from the bottom side. He now tries to do the same thing. Meanwhile, Holly looking to take away the race lead. He dives to the inside of Acosta. Acosta leaves space in the Level Motorsports machine as the North Star Title Company machine dives to the inside.
Acosta went very high 2, 3, and 4, and it really hurt his exit speed. It looks like he's just got enough to get back in line ahead of Holly though by the time they get to turn 1.
Also passed by Blaine Adams, who had an air technical issue and lost another 3 laps. It's out of the way as we look on board with Knight. Off to a good jump in P3, was able to fend off O'Brien, and now crosses over Holly off of turn 4.
We'll have to see here if Holly can hold him off on the top side. I think he can. It looks like the top's very strong on the exit of 4, making it very difficult to make a pass on the bottom.
In these types of battles, would you rather be on the top line or the bottom line to try and make a move such as that try and work?
I think if you can, the goal is to get to the right rear quarter panel of the car ahead of you, and if you're defending, that's what you've got to cover off. As we see Richie Regan Jr. trying to pull a pass on the bottom, Josh Daniels on the top side. Daniels with a good run, but Regan Jr. actually able to maintain enough drive off, really pinching the top line there.
And that's his teammate. Yeah, pushed his teammate nearly up the racetrack for the late arc. He did have to check up a little bit for him in 1 and 2, and that takes away the top 5 for the time being from Joshua Daniels.
And I think that there showed you how aggressive you have to be on the bottom line to make that pass work and to take away that drive off advantage that the top line will have as a defensive play.
Top 5 separated by only 1 second. And now Knight's falling off after trying to take a dive to get underneath Holly. It seems like some of the tire wear there's kicking in. Regan Jr., he now looks to dive to the inside of his air teammate and James O'Brien into 3 and 4. And O'Brien looking like he's going to give it to him. Yes.
And I think this is smart by Richard Regan Jr. Phoenix is a racetrack where we tend to see either an extremely long green flag run or lots of yellows. And so far we've seen 2. I think if it was me, I'd be doing exactly what he's doing, trying to get as much track position as possible before the next caution comes out.
He's actually the fastest car on the racetrack too, Christian. And we're seeing why. Knight was loose off of 3 and 4 last time by. This time, hard defense for the riding shotgun machine. Remember, they had history. At the Brickyard, Regan Jr. gave him a bump and run for the race lead in turn 1 and 2, and they weren't quite happy with each other after that.
Yeah, I think Knight's going to be keen to keep him behind, but looks like he's just driving into 3 and 4 much harder than Regan Jr. is right now. Last time by, he saw the rear end of his car really skating all over the racetrack, and that's going to hurt him as the run goes on. And I think it's going to hurt him in the immediate as well, because he's washing up just a little bit. Looked a lot better this time, but last time by, he washed up from the yellow line. Regan Jr. had a better run through the corner overall.
Mind this Knight's 4th race. Since that race at the Brickyard has missed the past couple races with DNSs, and now the bottom side to his fellow Ford Mustang. Up To P3 goes Richard Regan Jr. He is a tenth faster than the top 2 right now. And everyone else has already fallen off outside the top 5 to the 28.1s, Christian. That's already about 7/10 of a second.
Yeah, and definitely looks like Regan Jr. is the quickest so far. It'll be interesting to see if the top 2 are trying to save a little bit of tire right now. And the last time by was exactly kind of how Regan Jr. was hoping it was going to go, I think, because what happened was Knight actually tried to defend on the entry by driving in really deep and washed up, and it just killed all of his exit speed, and that's what allowed Regan Jr. to be fully alongside him by the time they got to turn 2.
And what's your thoughts on that run in turn 1 and 2? You talked about a little bit during qualifying, but how difficult is it to stick that line to make sure you don't have to get off the gas here and make sure you don't hit that big blue safer barrier?
It's extremely difficult. It's one of those corners that's really deceptive because you always want to drive in deeper because you think it's going to give you more mid-corner speed and just, as we have another yellow.
It's 26, James Duke. 76 spun around for the 3rd caution, and that was our longest run of the race. Unfortunate for Duke in his first race back in competition, as that was with Alec Lumpkin, who got loose trying to avoid the safer barrier, Christian.
Yeah, you saw there trying to pull it down off the top of the racetrack. You see right now, this is a lap before, so obviously there was some attempt here by Duke to try and get this passed on. Got very close to him on the exit of 4 that time. You see the 89 running the very top of the racetrack, and right there, you see him getting loose and just coming down and unfortunately clipping the 76. And that's something that we've seen quite a lot at this racetrack, where drivers get loose by trying to actually pull away from the wall, and it will really snap the car around. It's even more of a factor with this high power low downforce car than it was with the high downforce car.
Now here's one of the craziest strategies so far of the race. The leader Abner Acosta pit. Much of the top 10 outside of him stayed out. Johnson, Lane, Zemke, Mike Knight, Scotty Johnson, Mark Kalin and company are the air drivers who pit. So about 11 drivers here, Christian, elected to stay out this first time around instead of coming down for fresh tires.
Yeah, and it looked like Abner Acosta was actually kind of duped by the cars behind him. They were all following him into pit road, and then at the last second peeled off. That said, this could be an interesting strategy to maybe get himself all the way to the end of the race if the yellows keep coming. Obviously, they've only really done about 15 laps under green on this set of tires, so they're still pretty fresh, to be honest. It seems a high-risk move to burn a set this early, but if you can get back to the front, it might work out.
Coming up to 80 laps to go, the drivers who just pit will be about 12th on back for reference sake. This means Bradley Holley's up at the front of the field. We've talked a lot about Holley this season. Has looked much stronger, it seems, this campaign. He's talked about on the truck side. Some of the competitors on that side, especially drivers like Knight and a couple others, have pushed him to put in a lot more prep into those races. It seems like Regan Jr. and company have pushed him a lot to try and improve, because he's now back within range for a championship fight this season.
Yeah, Holley has really emerged as the consistent contender to Richard Regan Jr. And really, that's been the case for the past few seasons. There's been drivers out there who've been able to challenge Regan Jr. in terms of every race, every now and again, in terms of outright pace, but as a consistent challenger, it's really been Bradley Holley. And I think this is a little bit role reversal that we saw at New Hampshire with these two, and it'll be interesting to see if Holley can actually hold them off.
Absolutely. Biggest mover so far, by the way, among the drivers who stayed out there at the back of the field, Christopher Williams in his first race of the campaign on GSRC. He's in the 09 machine, and his fellow teammates cheering him on, to say the very least, tonight. He also just so happens to be streaming his Twitch viewpoint in the Blue Knights Drum and Bugle Corps machine.
Yeah, as a driver who actually had a really, really large pickup between practice and qualifying. He only ran a 28.2 in practice, but managed to get himself down to 27.78 in qualifying. So one of the few actually to really have a big pickup there.
In the non-broadcasted series, he was a 7 driver in point standings. Finished in the top 5 of the 6 times, and top 5 once. That campaign, the top driver that was Jeffrey Smith. Jeffrey Smith, of course, was involved in earlier caution flag as in P25, who had 2 victories, but of note, a couple drivers have peeled back down to the pit lane, sacrificed the track position. Adam Young amongst them. We've seen Young do that a few times where he'll come down the pit lane, go to the very back of the field, let the carnage happen. He actually talked about, Christian, that he was very nervous about tonight, to the point where he was trying to relax by trying to put in X Games type moves in the pit wall tonight.
Yeah, we saw him pulling some interesting practice strategies, to say the least, and obviously right now he's cycled himself back to the back of the field by choice, which is obviously interesting in terms of short track racing. The track position is really key, but I think he's expecting a little bit of carnage in the late race, and hopefully if he's got a clean car by the end, he'll be able to gain himself some good spots and maybe get himself back up near the top 10.
See how the tires hold out for the 10 drivers who stayed out this caution flag. Holly Reagan Jr., Knight O'Brien, Daniel Cervantes, Harvey Bisson Jr., Sumner, and Williams. Those 10 drivers. Acosta, the first driver on 4 fresh Goodyear Eagles. Pace car is off. 77 laps to go. We're back underway as the Winnebago Racing Machine up to the gears.
And now this is all about how quickly Acosta can clear these cars on old tires, because this advantage won't last forever. It really was only 15 laps under green, so the tire difference is not what it would be at, say, a mile and a half. The tires have not got so hot that they've lost all their life for the drivers who stayed out.
In the mid-pack, several drivers got bounced around. Jose Medina lost several positions in the Hornet's Nest. Everyone else about 2 wide to the back part of the field, while the leaders, they're all nice and calm for the time being. Acosta, meanwhile, was already up to 8th spot on the freshies.
Yeah, and this is where it becomes a difficult challenge between being assertive with your passes when you've got fresh tires and not taking too much risk that you actually turn a guy around and bring out another caution, because this strategy relies on a caution not coming out. Every time there's a heat cycle on the tires, it will start to equalize them out more and more. So you have to press this advantage on fresh tires, but you have to do it in a way that's not going to bring out another caution, because it will hurt your own strategy.
100%, and we see Acosta going 150%. This is for P6. Danny Cervantes giving him lots and lots of room. Acosta needs to close up a gap of about 1.7 seconds to get back up to Bradley Hawley with 74 to go.
And I think if it plays out where he gets some clean air, he's definitely going to be the fastest car on the racetrack for some period of time. But he just has to make his way through these cars calmly, and right now he's working on the back of Joshua Daniels. It looks like he's going to go for a move into turn 3.
Colton Lane, the air driver, is moving right behind him. You see as Acosta not able to make the move on Daniels. Mike Knight has also gained positions with this strategy call. Everybody else, Christian, though, they've been too busy fighting each other to get by the rest of the drivers on the older tires, about 13th on back.
As we see a car actually go into the wall at the flag stand.
Caution flag is out. Several drivers spinning. Scotty Johnson, Brandon Adams, Jeffrey Smith, Jose Medina, several others involved. That's a Phoenix incident on iRacing if I haven't seen one.
Yeah, that's something we see a lot, where drivers get spun off of turn 4, and then they all, because of how close the walls are on both sides of the track, it's really like a New Hampshire turn 4 where there's nowhere for anybody to go, and everybody just stacks in. You see right there, Christopher Williams unfortunately involved as well, so it looks like he's got away with some minor damage.
I don't even think he got any outside of the left rear with how he locked it up, but Johnson got loose, tagged a couple drivers, and then everybody bottled up all the way down into 1. Actually got a bit of help. That's one of the Adams who came down.
Yeah, and that's another common thing that happens on the exit of turn 4 at Phoenix. It really does funnel cars together, and it's maybe a 1.5 lane kind of corner exit. So you need a lot of give and take to get 2 cars out of there safely. And there we see the 07 having a big impact with the inside wall, and then getting collected as well.
So several drivers lose their front clips. Danny Cervantes elected to take fresh tires. Everybody else who came down was in the caution. Andor was having trouble. Lucky Dog Blaine Adams, who's had several technical issues. Everyone else, it's looking like a race from a modified racetrack rather than Phoenix for some of the competitors. Unfortunate for them. Not aerodynamically great in a cup car.
Yeah, and this is one of those tracks where it is reasonably aero sensitive as well, just because of how fast it is for a short track, so to speak. So that is going to hurt those guys, and they're probably going to be down a little bit on power as well with how hard some of them went into the wall.
Now, with some of the changes to some of the schedules on the iRacing service, for those who do not know, the NASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing series, as well as all official series taking place that week, instead of going to Watkins Glen International, will be going to the Daytona Road Course. Following that move, the PRL Cup Series has also made that decision this week. To follow that decision, remember the series lines up with a fixed series schedule each season for its respective schedule. And it's a track that might be a wild one because Watkins Glen, we've seen a lot of races there that have been very entertaining. Daytona Road Course, they're going 205 into turn 1, Christian.
Yeah, and that's its own interesting challenge. I think it's going to be something that people really don't expect. Obviously, drivers have experience with road courses in these cars. Say Sonoma has traditionally been the hardest road course. While I don't think the Daytona Roval is more difficult than Sonoma, so to speak, there's about 3 crucial braking points where you can have a really big off, which will end your day if you get them wrong. Obviously, the big one is down into turn 1. I've only done a couple of laps myself, but as the tires wear, the drop off is absolutely extreme, and you're going to be braking before you even reach the flag stand in order to get it slowed down and turned in for turn 1. So that's one major flashpoint that we're going to see at that racetrack as drivers try and pass each other, and definitely we're going to see some mistakes into turn 1. And then we've got the 2 horseshoes in the infield where they're, again, really critical braking zones, and if you just overshoot them a little bit, you can definitely lose the rear, and that'll be the end of your day. You'll be going off into the tires at both corners.
You get to have fun with the Coke series with that, by the way, as we talked about what should we expect for that race in a few weeks based on what you've seen and what you've heard.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a pretty wild one. I expect to see some more field spread for that race than we've seen at, say, other road courses, obviously with it being a new road course for most. That said, it's a track that pretty much everybody on the iRacing service knows very well just because of the Daytona 24. I think almost every single driver on iRacing has been involved in that event at least once for the past couple of years. So it's a track that's familiar to drivers, but it's not a track that's familiar to drivers in a Cup Series car. And it truly drives totally different than it does in, say, a GT3 or a GTE or even a Daytona prototype.
I think we'll have a lot to discuss by the time we get towards the season finale, absolutely, at the Daytona Road Course at the World Center of Racing, but one to go. Time to take a deep breath. Already, drivers have almost 30 minutes burned off the clock. Hawley, Regan Jr., Knight O'Brien, Daniel Acosta, Knight Lane, Besot Jr., Harvey among the drivers inside the top 10. Your thoughts so far as we get ready for lap 39?
I think, to be honest, this has kind of been a pretty typical Phoenix race, and I don't think Acosta needed that yellow to come out. His tires are going to be relatively equal now to the drivers in front of him. We've seen how hard it is to pass. I don't think it's going to get any easier for him.
Pace car is off. Acosta actually backed up until 3 and 4. Off and away goes Hawley, and Regan Jr. cuts off the bottom. Back up to the top side with 67 to go.
We see the 9 and the 77 kind of got stuck on the top side a little bit. The 9 able to get down. The 77 to Joshua Daniels not able to. Acosta's going to have a big run on the entry to 3.
Yeah, those fresher tires still up to the field. Remember as well, Cervantes on some of the freshest tires, along with Holyfield and a few others, are back in 16th. Side by side for second. Knight can't get the run. He's back single file for second position. Regan Jr. about 4/10 back from Hawley as Acosta takes away P4 behind him.
Yeah, an opportunistic move there by Daniel Knight, but it was definitely a good attempt. He nearly managed to get Richard Regan Jr. there. Regan Jr. electing to run the top side as Knight tried to get in underneath him, but Knight not able to get the drive off before that he needed to complete the pass.
So eyes go on these two machines, including the one you're on board with, Acosta and Lane. Drivers with some of the freshest tires in the field. 16 total laps, including caution flag laps now on these Goodyear Eagles, and they're the fastest cars in the racetrack by a tenth or two a lap.
And that advantage is starting to reduce, though. Obviously, it's a tenth a lap, which is still very significant, but it's only a tenth a lap compared to what it was the last run, where I believe it was closer to 2 tenths to maybe even 3 tenths at the very beginning.
That time by Acosta, 27.5. The leaders in the 27.7s again. Acosta had to check up, though, as he got up to the back end of Daniel Knight here. Colton Lane also falling just behind. Acosta not willing to take the risk, it seems, quite yet to take the dive, especially with how defensive that 17's been tonight.
Yeah, but I think he has to. He has to make use of these tires as he's now got to the outside of Knight. Knight with the preferential line through 1, but Acosta with the tires on the top, he might have enough to have a run to get the drive that he needs to still be on the outside of the 17 entering 3. And that could be enough for him to execute the pass. If the 17 gets loose in the dogleg, it's definitely going to hand the advantage to Acosta.
Knight still not backing down. Here's the thing. Knight's been loose off of turn 4. Whenever he's been on the inside, he backs off. All while the leaders start to have fun. 7 tenths gain. Now, between first and third, 4 tenths between second and third. Regan Jr. is there and wants the lead.
And Regan Jr. now looking to cut the dog leg, but not getting the runs that we've traditionally seen in the past that you can get by doing that. Although Holly ran high, and it's left the bottom open a little bit for Regan Jr.
Benches him on down, though, off the corner. The 184 still with the race lead with 59 laps to go on the board. Drivers also have to think about time as well. 27 minutes on the clock, Christian.
Yes, exactly, and I think this is where the 46 has really pressed hard on this set of tires, knowing that there's probably going to be another yellow, and I think the next caution period that we see, we'll see both Bradley Holly and Richard Regan Jr. coming down for tires, but I really think that Acosta might have hurt himself by burning a set of tires early. Obviously, he's quickest right now, but if there is another caution, it's going to go against him.
Have to wait and see as Regan Jr. ships it off into the apex and exit of turn 1 and 2. Gets a little bit of the ground on back, but now some of that tire wear kicking on in with the equalization. The thing is, Holly seems a bit more stable. Regan Jr. seems to be really bouncing off that right rear tire on apex, especially off 4 right there.
Yeah, Regan Jr. looks wild right now. He's sliding the car all over the racetrack, and with this high power car, that's going to hurt. When it comes to short tracks with this package, the limiting factor is, well, there's 2 limiting factors. There's one is how much you can rotate through the corner, and the second is how well do you maintain drive off. And obviously in a fixed setup series, you don't really have a lot of control over how well the car rotates other than backing up the entries as much as you can, but you absolutely do have control of how well you keep the rear tires on, and I think this is not helping Regan Jr. right now. He's burning the right rear off at pretty much every corner exit.
Costa is there, though. He's trying to take advantage of that balancing act right now. From the AthleteBooker.com eSports machine, another late break for the 46. Costa just waiting, I think, for that right moment, as you talked about. And to emphasize how much work it takes to try and save a tire in a fixed setup race, drivers have put in thousands upon thousands of laps to do so. Acosta, he gets squeezed by the points leader. He's down to the apron. Knight and several others will pass him.
Yeah, I think that was a bit of an opportunistic move there. He did have a good run off of turn 4, but he wasn't alongside really at the kind of the turning point for the corner. You see there, dives it in very late, did all that he could to keep off the 46. Actually did a great job not to make contact, and very lucky not to get collected by any cars behind, but there goes all of his tire advantage. He's now way back in 12th spot, and that's pretty much the end of his challenge.
Not only that, Christian, Colton Lane, you seen him in the backdrop, had to check up big time. He lost even more spots because of that. He was right behind him.
Yeah, so that really couldn't have gone any worse for those drivers that had the fresher tires. They've lost everything that they gained.
So now a cost of 5 seconds lost for the race leader because of that mistake. The fight is back on between Holly and Regan Jr. And for obvious reasons that 60 probably wants a caution flag, the leaders, they just want to play.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously now they've got a pretty big advantage. They've got about 2 seconds back to Daniel Knight in third right now. So for them, they want to see this stay green now.
Lap traffic is up the road. You see Scotty Johnson's modified up the racetrack. Jose Medina also within range. Lap car way out of the groove, out of the way, not a factor on this corner exit. We'll have to see, though, if the next lap car ends up being a factor because traffic management so crucial, especially if you say reach them on the exit of turn 4.
And Regan Jr. with a big moment on the entry to 3 just keeps it out of the wall, but he was so out of control right there.
I think he's lost all that grip on the right rear. He might have burned it up. Third place nearly also overran Scotty Johnson at that point we just talked about.
And it was something that we were keeping an eye on, saying how wild he was looking on the corner exit. And it did look like he'd actually kind of got it back in check on the past lap or so. But then that big moment into 3 shows that right rear tire is definitely upset with him.
He may need a caution flag here, to say the very least. 2/10 back now to 6. Pat Harvey, loose off the last set of corners, was able to save it. He's lost several positions down the front straightaway. He was just outside the top 10 in the 67.
And Pat Harvey, actually another driver that we used to see save tires extremely well. So having some issues this week and losing some positions right there. Abner Acosta has only recovered a P10 so far, and is actually not gaining on the leaders. He's back to being about 5.5 seconds behind compared to about 5 seconds when he initially had that mistake.
Already past halfway in this race, Holly, Regan Jr., Daniel Knight, O'Brien, Bisson Jr., Mike Knight, Cervantes, Kalen, Hollyfield, Acosta the top 10. I think we need to keep an eye, though, on the 25 just up the racetrack, because remember, when everyone else came in to fix their damaged race cars, he took 4 tires. He's got the freshest tires out of anybody in the field now.
Yeah, we've seen this from Danny Cervantes in the past as well, where when he does have a little bit of a tire advantage, he's generally quite ruthless in how he cuts through the field, and obviously that's what you need when you have the tire advantage. And obviously the highest of those drivers that had pitted for tires at this point, and with a little bit of pace over the leaders right now.
Last on by was in the 28.6s. Leaders are, though, in that ballpark. He also, however, mind you, has a traffic jam of Bisson Jr., O'Brien, and Daniel Knight, who are all single file, just up the track 1 car length. And the battle that's formed up for P3, the leaders have taken off and away by more than 2+ seconds from everybody else. That's how quick they were on the short run.
Looks like everybody's kind of forming up behind Daniel Knight for this P3. It's going to be interesting to see how much they start to slow each other down when we kind of get that battle happening between Daniel Knight and James O'Brien, and obviously this secondary battle right here with Cervantes and Bisson Jr.
See the 3rd and 4th place cars not making a move yet. Cervantes just behind them, not able to make a move on that 3 machine. You see at the very right side of your screen, either from the late arc. Might be able to set it up off the corner. No, had to check up once again. Give credit, though, to Mark Kalen. He's had to fix damage tonight, Christian. He is in P8, plus 10 on the race, just behind this group. And slowly has been somewhat faster than some of these times in this group.
Yeah, he's having a great night so far, and obviously got a little bit of breathing room to the next group of cars in front of him. And with these guys fighting, he might have an opportunity to maybe even get himself up inside the top 5.
Looking on board with Danny Cervantes. He's diving to the inside line. Just can't get the run quite yet. More lap traffic is upcoming in the next few laps, though, if this keeps green, Christian, and that could be heavy for all the groupings, including this one. First driver within range to be lapped is Matthew Wilford, who is about 10-15 car lengths in front of the leader.
Yeah, and obviously as they start to encounter battles on the racetrack, it becomes less and less, how to put it, the drivers they're trying to lap are not as receptive to moving off the racing line, so to speak, because they're having their own fights, and obviously that will slow the leading pack down. Now, when it comes to blue flags on oval, there's not really such a thing. So it really comes down to the leader and kind of picking a line and just making the pass himself rather than relying on the niceties of the cars that he's lapping.
Danny Cervantes to the inside. Finally, this is for P5. One thing to note, Colton Lane elected to come down and pit, surprisingly, with 41 to go. As B-Shot Jr. goes out of the groove, Cervantes is up inside the top 5. Here's a question. What's the fuel mileage? Because if you've stayed out the whole race and it goes green from here, can they make it?
That was actually one thing that I was thinking about. Now, I don't have any fuel numbers myself, but traditionally at Phoenix, we're kind of used to split races of about 160 laps in half. So I'm thinking that the drivers who pit earlier, I think they're definitely good. Now, whether the drivers who haven't pit at all this race are good is another matter, but it doesn't look like anybody's out there trying to save fuel right now.
And that's where I'm wondering the decision from Colton Lane. This does put him a lap down. He is in the lucky dog spot, however. C. Hawley, though, leads by a second as he's now reached Willow Ford, as we were talking about and expecting. Might get held up a little bit right here. Other than that, nice and clean. Battle for P3 is now side by side as well in the backdrop. Daniel Knight has now given up the inside. O'Brien, that time not able to get a good run on the dog leg, though, and several drivers with the fixed setup Christian talked about they had struggled in the dog leg with looseness on the throttle.
Yeah, that's something we're seeing. A lot of drivers are getting good runs and they're underneath the car coming off of turn 2, but they're not able to make anything of it because they cut down to the dog leg, and I don't know whether they're having to full lift, but they definitely don't look like they're able to maintain full throttle, and that kills all the momentum of that line as we see the 9 again ran down through the dog leg despite not being alongside a car, and now it's allowed Danny Cervantes to get to his outside on the exit of 4, and it's going to give the 25 a huge advantage as they get down to 1 if he can maintain.
The Littlefoot oil machine still stuck on the top. Not where you want to be as cars are slipping and sliding with a bit of smoke there too from the battle behind, but Cervantes not giving up. O'Brien, we've seen him struggling the dog leg last time, this time much better, and this has allowed Bisson Jr. to try and fight back as Willowford tapped into the wall.
Yeah, not a scenario that you want to be involved in if you're a driver about to go a lap down there. Obviously, too wide behind you in a big battle for P3, but Cervantes able to make use of that lapped car and able to get around on the top side through 3 and 4 there, and now he's looking at Daniel Knight.
And this might be tough to pass this riding shotgun machine because we've seen how hard Knight has hugged that bottom line when he can. He is not going to let you by easy.
Yeah, Knight's been very difficult to pass all night, and interesting pun right there, but it's not that he's being aggressive in his defense, it's just that he's not making mistakes. And if you just pick the top line and force a car to try and pass you on the bottom, then you're really putting the onus on them to not get loose on corner exit. And we've seen really that when it comes to 3 and 4, the top line in a side-by-side situation is definitely the place where you want to be. And in 1 and 2, you want to be on the bottom, but if you don't have a big enough run through 1 and 2 to be significantly ahead when you get to 3 on the bottom lane, it's not going to work out. The top lane is going to out-drag you on the exit of 4, and you'll be back to where you were the previous lap.
And it's almost looking like still 2 in all of this, too. Cervantes just can't get that run to get up to the top, and he got a caution. Matthew Warford has spun around and throw the fuel mileage out the window. It's the 0-1-4 with trouble off of turn 2.
Yeah, you see that's it again, what we saw earlier in the race, driver trying to stay up near the wall and just getting loose and ending up cutting down the racetrack. Did get it stopped just before he got to the safer barrier though, so no further damage to that car.
We actually did tap into it with the left front, but on the bright side, Christian, just about all the drivers who haven't pitted yet just started thanking him on the radio.
Yeah, I think this is one of those runs where it's been green for so long that we're going to see absolutely everybody come down. Maybe only 1 or 2 drivers who just recently pit but they're going to be in the waiver ramp situation anyway. So I don't think we should expect to see anybody get cycled up to the lead by staying out.
So Danny Cervantes gained track position again with that tire call, +4 from his starting position, and was among the back half of the top 10 before his pit stop. This is going to be very crucial, though, because as we've seen, if you've got clean air, you're likely going to hang on as long as you don't kill the right rear. 4 tires and fuel, the name of the game.
And I think the driver that this actually gives a free pass to, so to speak, is Richard Regan Jr., because he definitely didn't look like he was able to challenge Bradley Holly. And now he's got a fresh set of tires where hopefully you can kind of keep the right rear on the car a bit better the second run. Maybe give him an opportunity to try and make that pass now on an equal footing.
He's also in P2 off the jump. Holly came out of the pit lane first. Knight, Cervantes, O'Brien, Bisson Jr., Acosta, Knight, Mark Halen amongst the top 9. James Dewar having to let cars go with this caution flag was the lucky dog. So that means Joshua Daniels was up the top 10. You see your biggest movers. Several of the drivers who struggled in qualifying taking advantage of the many mistakes by some of their competitors and have kept the cars relatively clean. 4 drivers with double-digit positions gained in the outside the top 10.
Yeah, and we've obviously seen a number of incidents already tonight in drivers that have kind of kept themselves out of that. That said, Chad Brown was one of the drivers involved in an early incident, and yet he's still +12.
Well, his car doesn't have the deficit of not having a front clip. Remember, several of the drivers have been driving without front noses for about 40 to 50 laps since that massive pileup.
That's very true. He did kind of have a more forgiving incident, so to speak, compared to what we saw with those drivers involved in that big wreck that we had on the front stretch. Who, as you say, all lost the front clip on their car and presumably are now very, very much slower.
The one driver this does burn, by the way, Christian, we talked about Colton Lane. He pit under green. He now has to take a wave around to get a lap back because of that caution flag. He didn't feel like he could make it on field now. From where was in a top 5 position before the trouble with Acosta, he's in 24th.
Yeah, this is where this is one of those unfortunate races as a driver, because he's not had a bad race. He's had good pace. He's been, as you said, he was fighting inside the top 5. Then there was that issue between Acosta and Regan Jr. that happened in front of him, and he kind of ended up involved by sort of doing a sympathy spin with Acosta. And then obviously lost so much track position, decided to take that gamble of coming down for tires under green, didn't get the lucky dog, instead has had to take the wave around, and now is at the tail end of the field on an old set of tires. And it's just an unfortunate situation where you kind of end up almost doubling down on what's gone wrong for you, and it's really not due to a lack of pace tonight. It's just how the race has gone for the 60.
Sometimes you just need a lot of luck, and tonight he has not had it. WEBB Racing Rescue Graphics sponsored machine. He'll get the wave around this time by. Same case goes for Jeffrey Smith, who had technical issues, lost a couple laps. James Duke will also be back in the lead lap in his modified, but it's Holly Regan Jr., Knight Cervantes, O'Brien Bisson Jr., Mike Knight after Acosta, Joshua Daniels, Mark Halen, now your top 10. Your thoughts as we get ready with 23 laps to go, and drivers have already been informed with this caution, Christian. They're not expecting to get the full distance in for tonight, hence why I said 23 to go with 10 minutes on the clock.
I think we've got to watch out for Daniel Knight in the 17 on this restart. If he gets a good jump following Bradley Holly, it's possible that Regan Jr. is going to be vulnerable on the entry to turn 1, and we've seen the 17 be quite aggressive. I think this might be an opportunity for him to get that second spot.
Pace car is off. WEBB Racing Joey rolls. Racing machine rolls off and away. And all running to the bottom side. Regan Jr. across the front nose of Daniel Knight. Knight trying to dive bomb him. Doesn't get the run as Regan Jr. clips the apron. Still, decent run for the top 2 to start.
Yeah, I think Richard Regan Jr. knew there was a possibility of Knight diving it in there underneath him and was keen to cover that off as early as possible. As we see, Cervantes has got the top in 3 and 4, but just drove in too deep. He might have enough to stay on the right rear quarter of the 17. No, he falls back, and loses that opportunity.
Daniel Knight, though, he wants to try and take advantage of an opportunity, and Regan Jr. not giving him any space. Squeezed him nearly underneath the yellow line, trying to hold on to P2 as Knight now with the run in the dog leg.
Yeah, with those fresh tires, able to stay full throttle, really sends it in on the bottom of 3. Regan Jr. with the top line, the preferential line, really trying to pitch the 17 down, but the 17 is going to have the best line through 1 and 2 right now. It's going to be difficult for Regan Jr. to hold on now.
Again, he tries to squeeze. See him working hard on the wheel. Burping the throttle. Knight takes the shortcut. Gains about a quarter of a car length as the caution is out. And it's at the back of the field. Lumpkin's now blown a motor. Several drivers also with trouble, including Charles Sumner and Brett Adams with his second triggered caution.
Going down into 1, the 99. Looks like we had the wreck was already happening. Charles Sumner across the racetrack there, stationary. He gets collected by the 99.
You'll see the cause is Adams gets shuffled up the track, and Sumner nowhere to go, and then pushes it right down across where one of the newcomers went. This is the reason they had the contact here.
So 23 was loose. I think there was a little bit of contact between him and the 90 there, but then just going around, and that's one of those things that's so easy to do at Phoenix. When somebody taps you on the entry to the corner, the car just drifts all the way through to exit, and you cannot get on the power. You just kind of have to let the car stop sliding and hope that you're not near the wall when the slide is over, so to speak. And unfortunately for Charles Sumner, he was coming around at just the wrong time. Not really any options for him open when there's a car that you're not certain is going to either go up or down the racetrack, and just ran out of time.
The newcomer in the 90, by the way, was Ron Holyfield, who ended up hitting the back end of the Adams machine. We haven't talked about him too much. He, at times, has floated around the top 10, and now is in 13th position after giving a bit of the bumper, to say the very least, to one of the Adams family racing machines.
Yeah, and he's actually had a pretty good debut in this upper series so far. I don't think there was any malice or any intention in that bump. It's just one of those deals that does happen at Phoenix, especially on a restart when the field stacks. But it's also one of those where it's so difficult for the car that gets tagged to really do anything to save that slide other than wait for it to end.
So the laps estimated are definitely going to start triggering down, to say the very least, and trickling down. There was under 7 minutes estimated on the clock for this race. Drivers have a projected 15 to go, and that's going to go down 1 to 2 per caution flag. So with that in mind, and what may be about, by the time we get back to green here, Christian, 3 minutes to work with, how do you play this? Because you may only have, with how this race has gone, maybe 9 laps if most under green.
Well, I think this is absolutely handed the advantage to Bradley Holly. This number of yellows that we've had, reducing the race lengths as much as it has, and actually the yellow came out at just the right time for Daniel Knight to be scored in that second position. So even better really for Bradley Holly. Obviously Regan Jr. has been his challenger for the vast majority of the race. Now Daniel Knight's in second. It's going to be interesting to see how that fight for second goes, and if Knight can maintain in front of Regan Jr. and maybe have a shot at Holly. But I think Holly is in a commanding position here, and obviously as the laps tick down, it just moves further into his favor. And obviously what he saw in the last restart with those two behind him fighting, allowing him to build a gap. If that happens again, I think it's probably game over.
As several drivers continue to come out of the pit lane, by the way, in front of them with damage repair, who else are you keeping an eye on to try and gain some valuable points? Because we've talked about how strong the championship has been for eSports drivers, as well as Holly. There's several other drivers who are going to be scrapping for top 10 positioning here after tonight, and some of the craziness and some of the bad luck for drivers in that group.
Well, I'm still looking at Abner Acosta to see if he can recover from, obviously, that earlier incident. Obviously, now he's up in the 7th spot. Everybody's packed together. He's got Biso Jr. in 6th. I think he'll have an opportunity to take that spot. Danny Cervantes has looked really, really strong, much stronger than I actually expected of him when the tires were equalized out. Another driver that's kind of had a bit of a quiet night, but running around still inside the top 10 is Joshua Daniels, and he's going to be starting 9th. Be interesting to see if he dials up the aggression to try and get himself a couple of more spots. Then Mark Kalin actually running inside the top 10.
Decent shot for him to get in our top 10 on the campaign. The lights are out on top of the pace car. Approaching 4 minutes to go on the clock. The lap total now irrelevant, with the total estimated to go. Holly's in control of the field. Daniel Knight, the highest position he's been tonight, in 2nd spot. Regan Jr. is in 3rd. Cervantes in 4th. James O'Brien rounds out the top 5. Bisot Jr., Acosta, Knight, Daniels, and Kalin round out the top 10. Final thoughts, Christian, before they send it hard into turn 1 and 2.
I think a lot of how the rest of the race plays out depends on how good a restart the 17 and the 46 get, and which one of them comes out on top as they come out of turn 2.
25 cars on the lead lap for what could be one of the last starts of the race. Holly off and away, green flag. Great jump for the race leader. Bad jump for Regan Jr. He nearly lost a spot in 1 and 2.
Cervantes was really trying to push the 17 along, but had to kind of back out of it. Presumably couldn't see, and now actually lost control of that spot on the outside. I don't think he's going to be on the outside of Regan Jr. as they go through 3 and 4 this time.
Big send by Knight, nearly hit the back end of Holly. They have about 7 estimated laps to go. This time by the stripe, 3 minutes to work with on the clock. Regan Jr. wants his 2nd back. Hard door slam by Daniel Knight once again.
And right there was nearly 2 passes going on at once. Cervantes looked to the inside of Regan Jr. as he looked to the inside of Daniel Knight. That could have ended very badly, but everybody kind of was on the same page there and worked it out.
Knight trying to set things up. Regan Jr. way loose. Reverse lock just about to save that race car. Now blocks Cervantes down the front stretch to try and hold on to the podium as the caution is out. Another stack up on the front stretch. Steven Durbin ends up getting spun around. Adam Semke ended up getting loose and doored him into the inside wall, Christian.
Yeah, and interestingly as well, after that happened, or actually right as the yellow came out, there was some further contact between Bisot Jr. and Abner Acosta going down into turn 1. It's turned Bisot Jr. around. He's going backwards down the dogleg right now.
Wow. Here's the trigger of the caution. And just as this happened, at the other end of the racetrack, Acosta and Bisot Jr. piled in, collected Kalin and a few others as well.
Nobody really with major damage in this incident, but obviously a huge loss of track position. I'm wondering if Bisot Jr. is going to be allowed to reclaim his position. This was what I was worried about with that battle for 2nd. It looked like that same scenario could happen, and this was simply a state where everybody in line was trying to make an inside move on the car ahead of them, and the middle car doesn't really have a lot of options in terms of what they're going to do, and everybody just kind of ends up bringing it together right at the corner apex, and unfortunately not enough space for 3 cars like that.
The race likely over when that caution flag, Christian. Your final thoughts on this one, as not the way I think these drivers wanted this race to end, especially with the lead starting to heat up between Holly and Knight.
And we've got some more contact happening on the front stretch right now.
23 stopped across the track, several cars stacking up. What is going on? Those were the brothers who turned each other.
I'm not sure if they thought the race was over or not, but we're definitely still scoring right now as we're getting some incidents. Yeah, that's a very strange one right there. It looked like the 33 started turning the 23 on the front stretch, and then drivers stacked in behind. Bisot Jr. was actually one of the drivers to kind of pile in.
That was Blaine Adams turning his brother Brett. Believe they'll get to keep the positions, but not the way people want to add more incidents from that caution flag. Final seconds taken away on the clock, expecting at least one more pace lap here with Holly finally breaking up the deadlock. After 6 straight races won by AthleteBooker.com eSports, Bradley Holly just about 1 or 2 pace laps away from breaking that spell.
Yeah, and I think this is really well deserved by Bradley Holly. As we said at the beginning, he's been kind of the consistent contender to Regan Jr. I think that Daniel Knight had some really good pace tonight, but was never kind of in that second spot to show us if he could have ran and challenged for the lead. Holly with just a really measured performance, not putting himself in any danger by say doing what Abner Acosta did, such as pitting and losing that track position. Always kind of maintaining in the lead, not making any mistakes, never giving an opportunity for Regan Jr. to make a pass on him when he was behind him, and he's been rewarded with the victory.
Expecting to still pace around for the time being. As you see in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, drivers have, in some cases, gotten that final lap trigger. See if we get that official total at the stripe, if they wave one more time around, or the checkered. For Bradley Holly, coming across the stripe. And as the pace car drives across the start and finish line, they'll bring them around one final time before they finish off this race. No celebration yet, with drivers not willing to risk anything, but either way, Holly is your race winner. Knight and Regan Jr. rounded out your top three tonight. An interesting race as several of the drivers want to pass the pace car. One thing to note at some racetracks, Christian, this is why everyone's stacking up behind this pace car, is if you pass the pace car and you pit before it, you risk a black flag, and this is why everybody has decided to try and congratulate Holly at the same time. 7 of them, in fact, it seems.
Yeah, and this is something that you actually do have to be really careful of. Obviously, with a league race, it's less of a concern. They can kind of count back and figure out the results that way, but you don't want to pit in front of the pace car at certain tracks, as you say, because it will EOL you in effect.
And everyone now has playtime, as now they get to finally celebrate. Bradley Holly's a winner, and Adam Yun ends up getting his car demolished. With this celebration, we'll take some post-race coverage. Step aside. Post-race coverage will come back after this. You're watching the Global SimRacing Channel, live from the virtual Avondale, Arizona. Welcome back to the virtual Phoenix Raceway for post-race coverage of the Precision Racing League Cup Series, sponsored by Diecast Kings. Visit diecastkings.com for the latest NHRA NASCAR diecast and more. By Road Trip Transport. Contact Road Trip Transport today by calling the following phone number at, once again, 251-525-7429. And by the ButtKicker. Feel what you've been missing by going to thebuttkicker.com tonight. It was a wild one, to say the very least, here at Phoenix, and a very interesting celebration. But Bradley Hawley is the man who breaks up what was a 6-race streak of victories in a row by AthleteBooker.com eSports. He puts Whataback Jelly Rolls Racing in victory lane. Second goes to Daniel Knight, Richard Reagan Jr. in third, Danny Cervantes, James O'Brien, Abdur Acosta, your top 6. Joshua Daniels in P7, Mike Knight, Paul Johnson, and Mark Kalin round out your top 10. Credit to the 62. It's his second top 10 of the season, Christian.
Yeah, Ron Holyfield actually came home in 11th, up 5 spots from his 16th place starting spot, so a good debut by him. Pat Harvey, after some earlier troubles, comes home in 12th. Adam Ewing started all the way in 29th, did keep the car together, and comes home in 13th, so a good run by him. Chad Brown, involved in one of those earlier incidents, another huge mover in the field, started 31st and comes home 14th. Christopher Williams up 6 spots in 15th. Adam Zemke had a little bit of a rough night and comes home in 16th. Derek Schilling in 17th. Brett Adams, we saw involved in that interesting incident with the other Adams car, and comes home in 18th spot, with James Duke in 19th and James Durr in 20th.
In 21st spot, Matthew Wilford, who brought out the caution flag that allowed everyone to make it on fuel. Brent T. Adams, 22nd, quiet race for him. Charles Sumner, 23rd, with a modified 24th. Robert Bisson Jr. has to be fuming after that trouble. Had a top 10 in the bag before that trouble in 1 and 2. Jose Medina, the last car in the lead lap. Stephen Durbin, 4 laps down in 26th. Jeffrey Smith, 27th. Lumpkin in 28th. Colton Lane blew an engine in the second to last caution, 29th, after what was looking like a promising race before. Lane Adams, trouble with technical issues in 30th. Scotty Johnson, the only DNF of the race, 34 laps down. But Bradley Hawley breaks up what was a dominating start to the season for the drivers who were a part of AthleteBooker.com eSports. For the first time, Whataback Jelly Rolls Racing is in victory lane. Bradley, how does it feel to break up that 6-race winning streak by that organization?
It feels great. Just a lot of hard work and trying to figure out how to drive this car this week.
Lots of drivers still slipping and sliding, but you seem to be the fastest car out of anybody on the long run. What did it take to try and make sure you had the best speed on the track and run away from everybody else while they burned off their right rear tires?
Just keeping their rear tires up under your car. It just seemed like if you just flat-footed trying to exit, you're going to spin them and just heat them up and just absolutely kill your drive off the corner.
You talked about a bit in the truck series. Some of your competitors pushed you a lot on that side of the garage to try and improve and try and get victories. How much has the past couple seasons pushed you to improve on the Cup Series side, especially with there being the different aero packages at some tracks and the different drivers you have to race against?
Oh, it's definitely been pushing me a little bit harder the last couple seasons. I'm loving it. It's always fun to have some stiff competition to race against and, race them week in and week out.
Next race is non-broadcast at Michigan. The following race after that goes to, or check that, reverse that, Darlington and then Michigan, should rather say. Your thoughts on those two racetracks, two completely different beasts.
Darlington's going to be, Darlington, and me try to keep it off the wall and try to keep the tires underneath you. And then Michigan is, probably, I would say, first 5-10 laps are going to be all about draft and keeping your aero package clean, and then worrying about tires after that. But we'll see when that week comes.
Who do you want to thank for being a part of your first victory of the season?
Whataback Racing for sure. We always practice week in and week out. You guys for broadcasting us, and Diecast King for sponsoring the series.
Congratulations on your first victory of 2020 Season 3. You put on a clinic, 65 laps led tonight.
Thank you very much.
That's Bradley Hawley with a dominant performance tonight. Leading the majority of the laps. Daniel Knight went to his highest position of the race late. And P2, he's with Christian Challoner.
Daniel, that looked like a pretty intense race, especially at the end there between yourself and Richard Regan Jr. And you're able to actually pass the driver who's won almost every race this season. So you must feel pretty good about that. If the race had gone green, do you think that you maybe had anything for Bradley Hawley?
I'm not sure I did. Bradley was real fast in the long run, like he always is. He's that way in the trucks, and well, he's just fast in general. But yeah, for those last few restarts, I wasn't too worried about having a long run anymore since we were running out of time. So I just figured I'd start sending it and see if I can get by him, and made it work out.
Yeah, that was definitely something that we saw, and we actually saw that earlier in the run with Richard Regan Jr. He was very aggressive in terms of how he was treating his right rear, and it looked like it was starting to hurt him when we had that long run. Was rear traction really an issue for everybody tonight?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was burning off the right rear, especially in 3 and 4 because it's so flat, and it was just those long runs were just playing the game of trying not to slide that right rear nearly as much, and I did it early in that first run, which hurt me for about that second half of the race before we pit. And then, I saw Richard Regan doing the same thing. And, once you overstep that boundary, it's hard to get it back, especially with how hot it is out there.
Yeah, definitely looked like it was a big challenge tonight. And obviously started in 5th spot, came home in 2nd. That's looking pretty good. And next week we head to Darlington. A very challenging racetrack, a different challenge though in terms of it's not a flat track, it's a lot of high banks, a lot of close proximity to the wall. You got any thoughts on that racetrack?
I'm looking forward to it. It might be as wild as tonight was, and hopefully we get some really good green flag runs in. But I've always liked Darlington. I haven't always been great at it, but for some reason I've always liked it regardless. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a driver's favorite. As you say, it's one of my favorites as well. Though I don't think it's one of my best racetracks either. Certainly not in terms of results. Before we let you go, is there anybody that you'd like to give a shout out or thanks to tonight?
Yeah, thanks to all you guys for having some awesome commentary and running these broadcasts. It makes it way more fun to come out here and race, knowing the races are being broadcast and commented on. So, and at PRL. Charles Sumner, all the guys that run this league. It's one of my favorites to run. So just grateful for that.
Well, thank you for coming and chatting with us. And once again, congratulations on your 2nd place finish.
All right. Thanks, Christian.
That's Daniel Knight, who came home P2. And for the first time in about 5 weeks, Richard Regan Jr. does not come home in victory lane. This breaks a 4-race winning spell. A winning streak, rather, on the season. Richard, how are you feeling after this one?
Glad to get a top 3. I'm glad I survived the first few restarts. I didn't think I was going to make it through that, to be honest with you.
How come?
It's just Phoenix, hot, and a lot of variables can happen, so a lot of things are out of my control.
How difficult was it to try and preserve the right rear? Several drivers talked about it being very loose. Holly talked about being very, very crucial tonight in his post-race interview.
Yeah, the right rear tire was definitely struggling on my car tonight. I wasn't able to do much practice this week, but Brad and Daniel are very fast drivers regardless, and I think they both did a really good job at managing their stuff, and especially Daniel on the short run and Bradley on the long run. I'm just glad I got a top 3, and I'm able to keep the points battle pretty close between me and Bradley.
2 very different racetracks up next. Next round is non-broadcasted at Darlington. Next broadcasted is at Michigan. Your thoughts on those 2 racetracks?
Yeah, Darlington's Darlington. It's tough. Sometimes I got speed there, sometimes I don't. So we'll have to see how it goes with practice and everything. And Michigan's gonna be Michigan. I feel like it's gonna be a smaller Daytona or a bigger Daytona, however you want to put that. It's gonna be a lot of drafting, a lot of side-by-side racing, and then if we can get past those first 10 to 15 laps, that's when the tire safety can be key, and that's when we'll start to spread out a little bit.
Who do you want to thank for being a part of your podium finish tonight?
Yeah, I got to thank James O'Brien and Joshua Daniels, my teammates at Athlete Booker. I got to thank Athlete Booker for coming on board. Neonism, MS Multiple Sclerosis Society, Susan G. Coleman, ButtKicker, Bruzy Racewear, Oculus Glasses, everyone at Bobby Dale and Heart Legacy Esports, everyone that supports PRL, and everyone that tunes in.
Congrats on the P3 tonight.
Thanks.
Richard Reagan Jr. coming home in third tonight, started off in P number 7. Lots to unpack about tonight. Christian, first things first, your final thoughts on this race.
I think it was honestly a very typical Phoenix race. We do see a lot of incidents at Phoenix. It's a very difficult racetrack, and it's as we saw, extremely difficult to pass, extremely hard to keep the rear tires on the car, and obviously we saw a lot of yellows tonight. I don't think it's a reflection on the PRL. I think it's a reflection on the racetrack, to be honest. It seems like this every single time I've ever raced at Phoenix, so it's just it's one of the considerations when you do race at this track. And it was good to see somebody take the challenge to Richard Regan Jr. and obviously he's been very dominant over the series, well, over the series as a whole this year, but especially over this season. And it was good to see Bradley Holly finally get rewarded for being consistently his closest challenger. I think Darlington for them will be a very different race, and I think they're going to have an even more different race when we come back to the broadcast when they go to Michigan. That's the track where you're flat out for a significant portion. It's very similar to a plate race now.
That's right up to my next question, because you get to race at Michigan on Tuesday. What should we expect from you in that JTG Dordery racing machine?
Well, I think we've got a pretty good handle on the car, and balance is pretty good over a run. And with it being more of a plate race, it's going to be mainly about having the right strategy, having the right tactics, not losing track position. And to be honest, I think that'll be the same when we go there with the PRL as well. It's going to be mainly about not making the wrong decision and getting shuffled out of line. And it's going to be very difficult to work your way back if you do get cycled to the back of the field for some reason.
We'll have to see how you do come Tuesday and how these drivers do come a couple weeks from now. It was an entertaining race to say the very least for tonight. We'd like to thank you for tuning in for tonight's exciting action from Phoenix. We'd also like to thank Charles Sumner and the rest of the Precision Racing League for organizing this strong series. We'd also like to take the time once again to thank the sponsors of the series, Diecast Kings, Road Trip Transport, as well as ButtKicker. Are you interested in advertising with GSRC? Channel's 1 million monthly global impressions are a great way to get your branding seen by a diverse audience. Follow the link in the description to the YouTube version of this broadcast. For more, the Global SimRacing Channel. I'd like to thank the companies that provide the software and hardware for our broadcast here on GSRC, now up on your screen. Special thanks to Judith Vaughn, who provides some wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of her great work. Thanks to the great team today of Christian and Sean. If you'd like to find out more about GSRC, go to upcoming races, find it at globalsimracingchannel.com. To help support the channel, you can check out our merchandise for sale at gsrc.storemv1.com, or you can check out our social media on Twitter at GSR Channel, Facebook at Global SimRacing Channel, and Instagram GSRC_Grand. Don't forget to head over to our YouTube page and hit that big red subscribe button, as well as the notification bell, so you don't miss a moment here on the Global SimRacing Channel. As mentioned, the next race on air will be round number 9, the pre-ultimate race of the campaign. It's at Michigan International Speedway, August the 9th. Is the scheduled time for that. Be sure to tune in. Coverage starts approximately 8:50 p.m. Eastern. Race starts at about 9 p.m. Eastern time from MIS. We also have upcoming races for other series listed up on your screen, including the Truck Series, getting to have fun in the dirt at Eldora. Be sure to mark those down, as well as many others down your calendar. But until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.